boy, when you're doing the remote things and even in hybrid environments, calling into a conference room or so, I think video is kind of expected. And now I will say that the whole Zoom fatigue, Teams fatigue is real. And there's definitely no question of, all right, when there's an external call that I'm like, oh, you know what, I know they're not going to be on video. Whew, stand up, walk around, take the pace around the office while I'm on the call. I mean, that there's a balance. All of the darkest days I had, all of the fears of, oh my gosh, is this ever going to get better? Those types of things. He has been the kind of the rock and the support for not only me, but for the rest of our executive team, and set that tone for everybody else, on down.
Welcome to the Change Agent Podcast. My name is Nathan Lesnowski. I'm Concurrency CTO, and I'm here to have great conversations with a great person about change and technology. This podcast has been running. We've had great guests. We've talked about fintech. We've talked about the change of manufacturing, the transformation of app dev and security, about changing payment processing. So many awesome topics. And this is a great way to kick off the new year by talking about change and especially what happens to an organization when the rug is pulled out from under you and you got to figure out what to do. So I got a great guest today. It's Sam Hilgendorf, and he's the CIO of Fox World Travel. And he's going to have a conversation with us today about what you do with your business to respond to adversity and do something with that adversity in a positive way. So welcome, Sam.
Pleasure. Thanks for inviting me, Nate. This is I've been excited for this. I've watched the previous Change Agent CTOs. Some of the guests you've had are just phenomenal folks, and glad to be part of it.
Awesome. Well, I'm glad you're here. So let's talk about the travel industry. We've had a pretty rough couple of years, and travel is one of those things that really went through a rough patch, shut down, turned back on again, shut back down again, turned on again. What did that look like for you guys, and how did you respond?
Yeah, it's been an amazing adventure. I'd absolutely say it's been a master's class in crisis management. Technologists deal with crisis regularly. Things go down, but never at least for me, never to the level of what we've seen, obviously, with the pandemic over the last couple of years. So I'll give you a little bit of background on who Fox is, what we do, and then talk a little bit about kind of what took place in March of 2020. So background. So Fox World Travel. We're a travel management and vacation planning organization. We're 60 years old, privately held, family owned. Been serving the Wisconsin area from a vacation travel perspective, all 60 years, and then really for about the past 40 or 50, supporting corporate travel organizations across the U.S. So the two different lines of business for our corporate customers, basically we support them and their travelers through travel planning, disruption management. So if I get stuck at an airport, what do I do? Where do I go? Things like that to ensure that travelers have a safe journey to where they're going. Yep. And on the program side, or the corporate side, being able to help with travel budgets, supplier agreements, any on-site services that they're looking for, so like meeting planning, incentive trips, and then providing duty of care for travelers, so that the organization knows, all right, if there is a situation in a city, I know if I have any travelers in that city, in that hotel, things like that. So that's the kind of the core of that business. The other bit of our business comes from vacation travel planning. So it's everything from planning that, all-inclusive trip down to Mexico to, taking a 2-week, European vacation to see everything from, Italy to Spain to France, et cetera. And those once in a lifetime trips. So that's what we do, and that's what we've kind of done over the last 60 years. Prior to COVID, we did about $500 million, a little over $500 million in total sales, and had an organization of about 350 or so folks. Mm-hmm. And then, March of 2020 hit, and really within about 2 weeks of time, we saw that top line sales number drop by about 90%.
Ouch.
It was amazing. I mean, I remember joking back then, I'm like, boy, organizations go out of business when they see a 10 to 15 to 20% drop. And here we are we're going to work off of a 90% reduction, and we don't know for how long. So that really has been an experience for us, and fortunately, we kind of went into it with a little bit of planning, a little bit of, all right, expecting something to happen. Travel has never been immune to external factors. When 9/11 took place, all travel got shut down for a matter of days. And it lasted, the impact was 3-4 months of, all right, do folks feel it's safe to get on a plane again or not? In 2008, 2009, in the global, Great Recession, travel was one of those first expenses to be cut from organizations. So we know travel can be heavily impacted by whatever external factors. So one of the first things that we did was we kind of started putting together what we called our recession plan, or our Black Day plan, which was, all right, when something comes, what are the steps that we're going to take, to work through that plan? And that was kind of one of our first steps in kind of the change management that was going to come, that we learned that was going to come with COVID. And so that putting together that plan, we basically color coded expenses, color coded line items, A, B, C, D, different levels of impact and things like that, and kind of had a lot of stuff, kind of played through.
And you had this
and
done,
we found that
you had this done prior to COVID.
So it's probably about 9 months prior to COVID, we started down the path of this, which was, talk about fortuitous that we actually had put some thought into it before the impact. So as we worked through those lists, basically when COVID hit, it came right out. We started down the path of it, and we moved from step A through step D in about 10 business days. Which was amazing. One of the first pieces of that was we had to have a philosophy. We had to put together what are we going to believe in? What are we going to do as this goes? Because we don't know what the next impact is. We don't know how it's going to roll. We're going to have to adapt. But what is that core philosophy that we're really going to kind of hold on to? And for us, it really focused around our associates. Our philosophy was we're going to keep our Fox family in place for the recovery. One of the unique things of this change, of this crisis, was we didn't lose customers. We didn't. Our demand basically was, this is a temporary thing. Now, how long is temporary? Is it going to be 3 months, 6 months, 9 months, 4 years? We didn't know that, but we knew those customers were all going to have the same needs or similar needs when we actually got out of it. So we couldn't make drastic changes to our business to just cut costs to meet the bottom line right there and get to break even. We had to have the ability to kind of recover as we went along, if that makes sense. So this philosophy, really starting with our Fox family, is kind of what held us through as each difficult decision kind of came through, and as each step of the way progressed, how we kind of managed that. And it helped us really explain the why for each step, knowing that, all right, this is really what this is all going to kind of come down to for us.
You hit a really huge point there, which was to understand your philosophy, because a lot of different businesses responded in a lot of different ways. And by knowing what you believed in, that then lets you infer from that how you were going to make choices. And I think you also hit a really interesting point where you're talking about you couldn't just take it all apart, in a sense, that your customers were still your customers. They are buying less, but they're still your customers in this machine that you've built, this set of IP and capabilities and ability to execute for those customers. You can't just take all that apart and expect to be able to rebuild it later. You have to have that continue to operate and then build a model around it. So how did you then take that state of, all right, we know that we were able to remove these things and we have this machine that's running, but it's running not at full capacity, and then adapt to the new ask from the customers?
So those were a lot of the toughest decisions. And like you said, the philosophy really carried us through with a lot of that. I mean, we got into the discussions of, do we do a permanent layoff? Do we make those cuts? Do we do something different? And again, keeping our Fox family, having that line, took every one of those really uncomfortable discussions and centered us back to, all right, we've got to be able to find an alternative that isn't just a layoff out of the gates.
Mm-hmm.
We've got to be able to do something different. And really, one of the first things that we got to was we did furloughs with folks, and we went to our kind of organization, talked across all different teams. So from our agents to our technologists to our sales folks, across the board, and said, hey, here's where we're at. We're gonna do a furlough schedule, and that furlough schedule went anywhere from 1 week a month that you were off, not working, to 3 weeks a month. Our frontline agents, they took the brunt of that 3 weeks, so they basically worked 1 week. So we were able to scale back the 75%, but still keep people employed.
Yeah.
Now, I tell you, one of the things that we had that was absolutely a gift at the time was we had the federal response with the PPP program, with the unemployment support, all those types of things. So we could do this furlough with knowing that so many of our team members, while not whole by any stretch of the imagination, we're still seeing some level of financial support through the course of this. But again, having that philosophy and being able to say, hey, here's my assets, here's my tools, here are my the things I can use, allowed us to take that step and quite frankly retain folks through the whole experience.
Yeah, I mean, what you're saying there, to some people may feel like a negative thing, right? It may feel like, oh, like you did a furlough or whatever. But in reality, I think what you did was something that was really honest and cared for the people that you were connected to within the Fox family and did what you could. And I think that response was very thoughtful, and it represented the extent to which you really cared to keep everyone as part of the Fox family. So I know that must have been really difficult, and it also had to be very intentional of a process that you went through. So I can really appreciate where you were how you were having to respond.
Yep. And it was. I mean, we felt miserable. I mean, I can tell you throughout my career, I never had decisions as difficult as those in that time. One of the things that made a huge difference, I think, for allowing this to be as successful as it is and getting us to the point where we're at is we tied some communication steps with it that honestly have now become just the norm for us in a positive byproduct. So our CEO, as we went into this, started, all right, I'm sending out a weekly email to the entire organization. Here's where things are at. Here's what's on my mind. Here's what we're seeing. So as we got to those decisions, there was so much transparency around here's what we're seeing, feeling, thinking, that folks knew what the state of the business was, and continue to know the state of the business. And that's something that stuck. I mean, we still, he still sends out a weekly update to everybody, and here's where things are at. Here's the good stuff that's happening. Here's the success stories to tell. Here's what we're hearing from the industry, pundits and other places. So it's just a different level of communication that's evolved from this. It's something I took the lead with as well, and I do a weekly update to our entire tech organization, as we've gone along. A little bit more of just the operational metrics. Here's where things are at, and as we complete projects, as we deliver things, or as a team member or team members step up and really go above and beyond. It's a great way of just recognizing, hey, the heroics that are happening each day. And I've learned I close out everyone with some music video, some music that I've been listening to over the course of the week, and it's just another way of, all right, a great way to end the week of listen to some sort of kind of pump you up, fire you up music, and that's turned into a way to kind of just keep the org galvanized as we've all gone through this together. We've all been both personally impacted by COVID in so many ways, but then also to have your business organization impacted, recognizing how we're all in this together in so many ways, and that just that communication and transparency to be able to show those things has made such a difference.
So the galvanization that you did and the extent to which you were able to really keep the band together, in a sense, right? Mm-hmm. How did you then have to change the way you interacted with your customers to address what became a different set of needs that emerged from the pandemic? I can imagine,
yep.
do they what do I need from a vaccination status to get to this country and back out of it? What do I need? Can I even go to this place? What's open? What did that new engagement look like, and how is it different from what you did before? And like, how did you
Yep.
navigate through that?
Yeah. It's continually changing. Every time we think it's kind of like, all right, it's settled out a little bit, it changes again. Omicron has definitely created another cycle of change with this, as Delta did before, as previous. We're definitely seeing and feeling that the traveler experience and what a traveler expects from an agent in a support for travel is changing. Previously it would be, I only really engaged with my agent if I dealt with disruption or my initial planning. But now it's like, hey, I'm 2 days out from traveling. I saw this goofy thing on the news. Am I going to be impacted by this? Do I have to do something different when I arrive at the airport? And their expectation is that the agent knows,
Yeah.
knows what the current CDC guidelines are, knows what the current state of what's expected at an airport in New York versus an airport in Chicago versus Madison, what those things all are. So that traveler is expecting more and more from what the agent provides, and we've had to adapt to that because it's, so much of it is still, we're there to support that traveler through those times. At the same time, traditional travel business models are very much built off of transactions. Our suppliers charge us a transaction fee for every ticket that goes in, all the automation behind those tickets. Every step along the way, there's a transaction fee, and that's typically how a travel agency charges customers. Well, transactions are still down. We're at 50, 60, 70% of what our transactions were in 2019, but yet there's a higher expectation for services. Mm-hmm. So now it's this new kind of, all right, well, what's the future of, our organization from a financial model, from the services aspect to, the customer experience side. And that is going to really be, I think, the next change that we have to evolve with, over the course of this, next, whether it's 12, 18, 24 months or so.
Interesting. So did you have to do a lot of upskilling to help people to be able to navigate that? I asked because, you mentioned it was transactional before, right? It was like, you want to go on a Disney vacation? Great. I've got the Disney vacation package for you, and here it is. Or your corporate jet, you got to get all these people. Cool. I know how to do that. It's just coordinate and go. Now it's, you need to understand the protocols at location 1, 2, and 3. You need to know that now Colorado has a indoor mask policy, and when you get on a ski lift, you still need to wear the mask over your face. There's these different things you need to be aware of. What was the upskilling process and change that you needed to go through to get your people ready to engage that way?
Yep. So a lot of it started with, all right, how do we get them the information? Where can we source the information? First off, that's up to date and accurate. And then how do we get that in front of them so that they have an easy tool to kind of get in, get out, understand. So we, we've got travel partners that have been able to consolidate and bring that stuff together so that, and the agent then getting trained to, all right, here's how you gain access to these things. But the also just having the conversation, it was a very different conversation there. So there's absolutely the education side on agents, and right, how do you have this conversation? Those things taking place as folks were kind of in this. Hey, I've never gotten asked this question before. What do I do with this? And their managers supporting them. So there's definitely been that kind of organic of, all right, I'm getting asked different questions now. How do I respond to this when it hasn't been kind of the traditional steps we've taken? So it's definitely I used the word galvanized before. A lot of it's the different teams kind of coming together to kind of solve some of those problems. One of the really a cool technology solution customers needed that they, none of us realized that they needed was, when COVID first hit, you had, crazy amount of cancellations, cancellations, in the thousands, tens of thousands, for us, all done over the course of a couple weeks. Now, cancellations were always part of travel. You'd have circumstances that would pop up. I have to cancel a flight. The ticket goes, into an unused ticket. And Nate, I don't know if you've ever tried using an unused ticket before. It can be a painful experience. What are the rules? How do I apply it? Yep. What's the value of it? Things like that. Now, so that was always a painful manual process, when you were dealing with, couple percentage of cancellations per total volume. Well, now we just hit 100% of cancellations per volume. So, I mean, millions and millions of dollars of residual, value for corporate customers that were now sitting there unused. So that was actually one of our favorite projects over the course of this event. And again, keep using the word galvanized. It brought our business travel operations team, our business units, and our technologists all together around how the heck are we going to solve this? And we were able to build capabilities around, if you went into an online booking tool. So if you use, we use Concur for most things. If you go into Concur, can we get Concur to allow us to use that unused ticket? And can we build the logic in, the actual transaction so that when a traveler books a ticket, we are able to apply a unused ticket without them necessarily realizing it. They would find out when, instead of getting presented the, hey, here's the credit card purchase.
Yeah.
No, we could just tell them, hey, we found an unused ticket belonging to your organization. We're going to apply it here. And so being able to take that, what was previously a manual process, and being able to automate it that a traveler could still do their normal behavior, but we could take those unused tickets and apply them. I mean, an awesome byproduct of this that we wouldn't have been pushed into doing ourselves if, we didn't all of a sudden have 100% tickets canceled over the course of a week.
Yeah, that's a tough, that initial effort to have to get through that was the generation of the new processes to deal with what would ultimately be a smaller spike, but a higher degree of service attached to that kind of scenario, right? Like necessity is the mother of invention to a degree.
It in that case, boy, was it.
Yeah.
It was interesting just the working through it. And it was a great moment for our organization to be able to say, all right, this is the most important thing we could be doing right now. So regardless of even where we're at from a sales and revenue perspective, we got to get this done. Just kept such a great focus even while, the world was kind of burning down. Keeping folks engaged and excited and feeling like they were making a difference was huge for us.
Well, I mean, you mentioned earlier that you didn't lose customers as a result of this, and you also mentioned that you kept your people engaged. It's that kind of moment when the chips are down and even your business is down, that when the economy comes back or the services shift and you meet those services where they need to be, that everyone remembers what you did during that original time. And that sounds like a lot of what happened here.
It is. It's, although I tell you, it takes reminding at times because I mean, we're all humans.
Yeah. What have you done for me today?
Right. There's a little bit of that. And it's funny because when we think about, when you think about the past, you think about the present, you think about the future, you have very different mindsets around these things. You look back at the past and you oftentimes remember the past in a much more favorable, perspective than was actually going on at that time. You look at the present and it's like, all right, you know what, here's my stressors of today. And here's what I'm focused on that I've got to deal with right here and right now. And you look at the future, and the future tends to be a lot more scary. And it's like, what can all go wrong? And you look at that future as possibly negatives. If this doesn't change right now, this is really going to be bad, and things like that. So there's this interesting balance of, you can't just focus on all of the successes, but you can't also just let them go and not remind folks of, here's what we've done together, here's what we've been through. And yeah, these circumstances right now are challenging, but they weren't anywhere near what was challenging 4 or 5 months ago. And we got through that, and we got through that successfully. And we enjoyed each other's company and time through that. We worked as a team, all those things. And we're going to continue to work as a team moving forward. So it's funny how the past, the present, and the future all have to kind of come together a little bit. You can't focus, too much on any one aspect of that.
Yeah, that makes total sense. When you think about, you mentioned one of these already, where the tech had to change, you had to respond to something and the tech changed. Where are other areas of how you had to change the platform, product, or technology that you engage your customers with as a result of the pandemic? Like, they're not visiting the offices as often as before, right? So maybe there's a shift to the kind of way that they're now interacting with you versus maybe the way they were
Yep.
before.
So it's a couple different ways. We were, again, luck favors the prepared mind. We were fortunate enough that we had put a lot of effort into our cloud contact center and into our kind of our collaboration hub with, Microsoft Teams, Five9, or the platforms we're using for those things. And we had built those out prior to COVID taking place. So we already had solutions that had capabilities to expand beyond just how previously customers interacted with us. So I think a great example of this is really around our vacation services. Historically, it was absolutely, we'd walk into mall stores, strip malls, things like that. We'd have signage and come in and help plan your vacation. I sit across the desk with a travel advisor. I create a relationship with this person, and I work through all the logistics of that, once in a lifetime vacation. Well, that wasn't an option anymore. Mm-hmm. So we had to replace that in some way, shape, or form. So we were able to use these platforms and build out both, chat capabilities and, more importantly, the ability to do virtual consultations over video, over Microsoft Teams, that allowed, that travel advisor to still create the same relationship. It just happened to be from their home desk, but being able to still see eye to eye, read the body language when, presenting with one option versus another option, what was exciting, what was like, I don't know if that's right for me, still being able to have that same dynamic, but in a virtual landscape, made a huge difference for keeping those vacation travelers engaged with us. And this, again, another kind of byproduct of, this is not a solution that's going to go away. This is now, virtual consultations is going to be a permanent, solution for us to engage with those vacation travelers if they prefer that approach. Or, if they're not within one of the metro areas that we have a branch, we can still, offer that same service to those folks.
That's super interesting. It reminds me of, we did a podcast with Nicolo Villanueva of Crisis Prevention.
Yep.
And they have a similar situation where they were having to do their crisis prevention training in a virtual way when they had everything was normally this in-person experience. They had to adapt all that. This has a lot of that same flavor where you lose that sitting across the table from you, but maybe to a sense you actually gain something. I don't know about you, but like one of the interesting things about the pandemic and virtual meetings has now, like you used to say, have this little like virtual eye into everyone's home. Like it's like you're kind of welcoming them. Like I see that you're an Avengers fan, and you can you have Thor's hammer and the Hulk's fist and everything. And they I know more about you in a sense by like being welcomed into your virtual home. And from a travel standpoint, that might almost be a little bit of a relationship benefit.
Mm-hmm. I think so. I've really enjoyed the video experience working with team members. I've got a 9-year-old daughter who has made it a game of, Sam's on a video call or Dad's on a video call. How do I sneak into the frame and wave to everybody? Mm-hmm. And it are those kind of personal moments of how the family interacts. It's just a different level of awareness and knowledge of each other as people, and how cool that has been. I was on a call this morning with a potential partner, and they're out of India, so it's 9:30 at night for them, and it's bedtime for their kids. And so he was working through kind of the bedtime cycle as we were talking. I'm like, that's just, you're not going to get that in that traditional just pure business to business conversation, and how much that just changes that relationship a bit.
Yes, totally. I really also appreciate that it's like normalized video in a sense. Mm-hmm. Like for pre-pandemic, most people were in the office anyway, right? But when you weren't in the office, most people didn't turn on their video. And now everyone does. And I think that's been when we get more and more toward the hybrid or high flex, as some people call it, sort of type of work experience, I think it's going to be nice to have that new alternate connection to people when they're in their home office. So
I couldn't agree more. And I'm right there with you. I mean, I've loved being on video for, doggone near 10 years. Been a very much a video pundit and kind of like, all right, if I'm joining a meeting, even if I'm the only one on video, I'm going to be the only one on video, and just try to create some of that peer
Yeah,
pressure type of thing. So when the pandemic hit, oh yeah, it was just like flip a switch, and nobody thought otherwise. I'm like, all right, I don't think there's any going back at this point. I think it's now, boy, when you're doing the remote things, and even in hybrid environments, calling into a conference room or so, I think just that, yep, video is kind of expected. And now I will say that the whole Zoom fatigue, Teams fatigue is real.
yep,
And
yep.
there's definitely no question of, all right, when there's an external call, then I'm like, oh, you know what, I know they're not going to be on video. Whew, stand up, walk around, take the pace around the office while I'm on the call. I mean, that there's a balance,
I
just like
agree.
anything
It's brought
in life.
freedom to the walking meeting and glad I don't have to be on video because I need to eat my lunch meeting and all that stuff, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Very much so.
all right. So I have one last question for you. I would love to hear about who has inspired you. Who is
Yeah.
someone, or maybe a couple someones, that have inspired you to be able to look at a crisis like you engaged in that was a tough one that didn't have any easy answers, to respond to it in an empathetic and effective way, and then to come out on the other side with a team that was well bonded. Tell me about like who helped you to do that.
Yeah, so I've got a couple of folks in mind for that. Probably the one of the first ones was it was really one of my first leaders as a consultant. So I started off my career as a consultant. I was a router jockey. I did develop, designed and implemented, networks for, folks like SC Johnson and Aurora and Miller Brewing and those, Milwaukee area enterprises. So I was with a company called Burby Information Networks. That was, at
Oh, sure.
some point,
Oldie but a
uh,
goodie there.
oldie but a goodie. Yep. Which was actually, acquired by CDW. And, one of my first managers there, his name's Bill Horsch, really was kind of the guy that took me a little bit under the wing. And was like, all right, there's something unique, something special about Sam, or at least he felt that way. And really taught me how to be a leader. That was really probably the first piece, going from an individual contributor consultant. And, I definitely had that streak of a little bit of the brilliant asshole aspect to me, and really softening a lot of those edges, and all right, how do you interact with folks and guide people and teach people and things like that. He was the first, and then so as I first got into leadership, he had moved up to a senior leadership role, but still was kind of that mentor and coach for every time there was a business crisis within our branch, within our teams. He was the person that was like, all right, here's what I'm thinking. Where am I off? Reel me back in, things like that. So a lot of that, especially that empathy side, really came from him at that point. And I think then the second person is, quite frankly, my current leader, the CEO of Fox. He's also the primary stakeholder, owner of Fox, and how he's led through all of this pandemic. So all of the darkest days I had, all of the fears of, oh my gosh, is this ever going to get better? Those types of things. He has been the kind of the rock and the support for not only me, but for the rest of our executive team, and set that tone for everybody else, on down. And knowing that, I mean, he's had just as many of those nights where it's like, oh my God, is anything going to get better? But to always have that, I got to be the rock here, and I've got to be that support in those things, and just shown me what really leadership in crisis is all about. Knowing that, I mean, at the end of the day, we all have roles, we all have jobs and things like that. I mean, he's got the biggest risk of the organization, with the entire organization that he's responsible for.
Yeah.
So those have really been the two, when I think about crisis management and learning how to be a good leader, the two different folks that have really kind of helped define that for me.
Awesome. Thank you, Sam. And I really appreciate you being so transparent about the challenge that the organization went through, how you were engaged in responding to it, and the ways that you took it to the next level as a result of what you had to do. So thank you so much for sharing and being part of the podcast today.
No, I really appreciate it, Nate. This was an awesome time.
Awesome. And thank you to our listeners. We will see you next time on the Change Agent Podcast.